Thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 22nd, 2022 meeting. So I need a motion for that. All right, Jennifer is the first, Mr. Fennell is the second. Any corrections, revisions, updates to that? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with the sign of nay? All right, that passes unanimously. We will go into the budget book process, and the first decision is do we group these together? The other committees have done that. We've done that in the past, so if we don't have any objections, we'll group all of these line items together in one action. So I need a motion to put this on the floor. All right, Mr. Wendish first, and Phil a second. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Sorrell, let him give his presentation, and then we'll walk through and ask questions and make sure we're all clear.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like we've done for the other committees earlier today, and we'll do for land use after you and the committee meetings tomorrow, we've got a short slide deck for you. So this might get a little repetitive for some of you, but for anybody that might be streaming just and only just this committee, or if you're a committee member that is seeing this for the first time. This slide shows sources of funds and uses of funds. Sources of funds is where the money comes from. Uses is where it goes to. This is in relationship to the entire budget, not just what this committee has oversight of. And so the recommended budget for all funds is a little over $148 million. The uses is just a shade under $151 million. Next up is our slide on property taxes that we show you each year, and again, all this information is taken from the budget book itself. The dark blue to gray wedges of the pie represent the operating levies of the organization. The pink and the red represent the pension-related levies of the organization. A couple of notes here in terms of EAV and the actual levy itself. Based on information and data from the Supervisor Assessment's Office, the budget includes an anticipated growth in EAV, or property values, of 4%, and that's for taxes payable in 2023. Calendar year 23 will also be the year that we do the quadrennial reassessment. That will take effect for taxes paid in 2024. Even as interest rates climb, we do expect to see growth in the EAV for that year, and even very small growth for a couple years after that. As it relates to property taxes, the recommended levy, as is presented in the budget book, is $29,403,000. That is applying the rate to the total value of all properties in the county. And the rate recommended, although I suspect that sometime yet today or tomorrow it will be changed, the recommended rate is 83.21 pennies per $100 of assessed valuation. That is an increase of 0.8 of a penny from the current year. In terms of across all funds, what this committee has oversight of, and that is $4.2 million in revenues and $4 million in expenditures. How does that stack up against the other committees? Well, you have oversight of roughly 3% of the revenues and 3% of the expenditures. The general fund in its totality is recommended to be a balanced budget for FY23 at $50,877,000 and change. Again, that might be impacted based on any changes to the levy that may occur throughout the committee process. And then how does this committee oversight match up with the general fund? So 6% roughly of the general fund's revenues, and again 6% of the expenditures in the general fund are through this committee. And there's roughly $3.1 million in revenues and $2.9 million in expenditures in the general fund that this committee has oversight of. That's a very high level summary of the total budget and this committee's oversight, Mr. Chairman. We're happy to answer any questions you and the committee might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sorrell. At this point, I would open it up to the floor. If you have any questions on the Ways and Means Committee, line items in the budget, things you want clarification or adjustment with. While you're thinking through your questions, I'll put a couple items out here for Mr. Sorrell or others. As you walk through the budget in the blue pages, the first one you'll see is the county treasurer. And the county treasurer, we do have a personnel staffing change of a +1 for an additional staff in the treasurer's office. So that is reflected in the budget. Scott, do you have any additional comments you'd like to share around that?
Only that, working with the treasurer through the request process throughout the summer, Nicole put in a request for an additional staff member. We've, both on the HR side and the finance side, we've worked with her to hopefully achieve what she's asked for, and we look forward to providing any assistance during the hiring process that she may need, presuming that the committee and the full board grant funding authority for that new position.
Any questions from any of the committee members on that?
Steve, I have a question. I was just wondering if we had approved an additional FTE in the last year or two for that department.
Great question, Mr. Rand. The staffing summary for the county treasurer's office has been at 5.0 FTEs going back to 2013. And the request would take it from 5.0 to 6.0 for FY23. We probably have data further back, but what's published is just back to 2013, so a decade. And for the last decade, that office has had 5 full-time equivalents.
So didn't the city treasurer change the way the taxes are collected, and they're no longer, I don't want to use the word receptacle, a receiving point, and the county treasurer picked that up?
Yes, Mr. Rand, the city treasurer, in his role as city township collector, has gotten out of the business of collecting property tax payments, and has, and as a result, the county treasurer's office has taken over that responsibility. Obviously, taxpayers are still able to make property tax payments either online or various financial institutions. But if you're actually coming to and even if you live in the rural areas, some of your township collectors, for those that still have township collectors, not all do, but for the majority of the residents that are paying taxes in our community, if you want to pay it face-to-face at a local governmental authority, the county treasurer's office is the place to now do that.
And we have some contract for those services, right?
So I think Madam Treasurer is in the audience, but I believe just by the function of the city/township treasurer getting out of that business, it defaults to the county treasurer. But we do also have a contract that helps administer a solid waste management or garbage fee for the city of Peoria that the treasurer's office does administer. And we do that for a fee, and that shows up as a separate line on everyone's tax bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mr. Chairman. And also I was going to mention that our treasurer did negotiate that fee to a little bit more of an increase for the county. So there is a compensation between the city and the county in that garbage fee or the solid waste management fee. And then the other growth is we're looking to gain a little better interest on some of the investments. As far as that's the revenue plus, and the expense, really the only adjustment in this is the addition of one more staff. I just wanted to make that clear, see if anyone else had any questions for this topic or the treasurer. If not, we'll move to the supervisor of assessments. Really,
Steve?
oh, sorry,
Uh,
Mr. Fennell.
Are we going to do this approval of the extra staff in just one thing, one motion at the end, or is this, we don't do it separately?
Yeah, we're not, good question. This is for the budget approval. Mr. Sorrell, you want to
Right.
walk through that?
So, sure thing, Mr. Chairman. So, the motion on the floor is obviously for the appropriation and the spending authority. This is an elected office that we're specifically talking about here. Pursuant to statute, you make an appropriation, and the elected official's office can then use those dollars in the various buckets: personnel, commodity, contractual, et cetera. And so, the staffing resolution that is on the Joint Finance Executive Committee agenda tomorrow is only for those positions under the supervision of the County Administrator's Office and any of the departments that report to the Administrator's Office. So there won't be a specific vote on this position. There's merely the spending authority should you grant, assuming you approve the budget.
Okay. Does that answer what you need, sir?
Yes, it's
Any-
inclusive in the budget. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's inclusive in the budget.
I could have said it much more easily. It's inclusive in the budget.
Yeah, but it was good. It helps to educate all of us. Okay. I won't walk through all of the others. The assessments, supervisor assessment one, didn't change any in number of people. Nothing significant in change there. County clerk, again, stayed flat on people. So nothing significant unless you want to call something out. And the clerk's recording automation fund, there's nothing really significant. The election commission fund does vary year to year based on what cycle we're in and how many elections and such. But it's pretty much where we've always been as far as alignment. And the Veterans Assistance Commission Fund, this is one that we have spent some time reviewing. There was an act in the state of Illinois for election commission, or the VAC to provide more support to veterans. And in that, it does give them the ability to levy their own amount up to 3 pennies. So they went from 1.5 to 2.3, and that's our 0.8 that we spoke of and that Mr. Sorrell talked about earlier. So that's a decision that has been taken away from the county as elected officials and provided to the VAC to make that decision at this point. So from that standpoint, we do see that amount going up about $305,000. I think that's for the addition of 2 additional headcount to manage, and then some other operating costs. So I want to see if anyone has any additional questions before we move forward on that, further deeper in that topic. Is that?
Steve, it's Andrew. Can I ask a question, Scott?
Yes.
Scott, what year did we run the advisory referendum for a full penny for the Veterans Assistance Commission?
Looking at the staffing patterns and the increases in property taxes, the advisory referendum looks like it was run in the 2016 election cycle, and then you put the results of that advisory referendum into place for FY17.
So that was for a full point, correct? Has the combined levy, inclusive of that point for them, gone down since the county board decided to go ahead and implement the advisory recommendation?
No, in fact, the levy over the course of time has gone up by statute. The maximum that the board could levy is 3 pennies. The request before us is for 2.3 pennies. from the current year back to the FY17 area, we were levying a penny and a half. And as you correctly noted, Mr. Rand, prior to the non-binding referendum in 2016, at that point we were levying roughly a half a penny a year. Some years it was a little bit more, some years it was a little bit less, but throughout the course of time, it was hovering right around that half a penny mark, and we moved it up to a penny and a half after that referendum.
Well, aside from the levy, what other operating funds did we or did they get for themselves? Because operating on half a penny sounds a little lean to me.
Right. So they do, the Veterans Assistance Commission does receive a portion of our CPPRT allocation.
Right.
This year, the current year, it's projected to be about $142,800. Next year, we're recommending that revenue be around $98,500 and change. They also get a little bit of interest income based on the reserves that they have, and they do get some expense reimbursement from the state. That actually is starting. Prior years, it's been roughly $2,000, $1,800, but based on that change in the statute, that is supposed to increase to $10,000 starting January 1 of 23. So total revenues, are going up $358,000, and of that, 305 is the increase in the levy from current year to next year. So there's about 50,000.
Go ahead, Scott.
I would say there's roughly $50,000 of revenue increase not associated with the property tax.
Mr. Chairman, I have two more questions, one for Scott and one of you. Scott, the change in percentage of operating expense, all sources of revenue included here, is what percent?
So
from last year?
Sure.
Revenue was 302,000 on 300 something change.
Sure.
Is plus how many percent?
So revenues are going up 63%. They're going to go from roughly projected as 648,000 up to 923. And then on the expenditure side, the projected budget is 582,000 current year, going up to 892,000 is the recommended expenditure level.
For 52%.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, 52%.
Thank you. Mr. Richter, I was privy to, and I appreciate the email that you circulated about a week ago seeking some clarification. Did you receive any from Mr. Brooks?
Mr. Brooks and I and Trish did have a meeting last week on this topic, went through the discussions.
I'm sorry, Steve, you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Talk a
I'll
little
get closer.
to the mic.
So we did meet last week, had some discussions around the expenses, and the short of it is these are the expenses that they have put in, and at this point, this is what they're asking to serve the veterans.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you. Thank you for asking. It's a good question, and it's, I guess my limited time here on the board, my first experience of having a budget line item that the board is responsible for, but the board doesn't have authority over any longer, at least to my understanding. Ms. Groves Allison?
In your conversations, do we have reason to believe that this ask is going to come again, given that they have an additional leeway to come back for the full 3 cents?
Yeah, it's a good question. So they're at 2.3 pennies now. They could go up to 3, which is the cap. We did not get a specific answer on that, but the implication is that there is an avenue that, yes, next year they may come back and ask for the full 3 instead of the 2.3. I don't know, Trish, you're here. Do you want to make any comments on that in respect to the VAC's intention? And again, this is a year out, but do you have any intentions of a different adjustment next year?
I can't technically speak for that yet. with the PACT Act and the new laws that are coming out, there's a possibility that next year we could ask for more. Today, by the time I left, I had,
Is that on?
can you hear me?
Yes,
Is it on?
there you
Okay,
go. Thank
sorry.
you. Nope.
I talk a little quiet. I had at least 32 vets, and I stopped counting. My phone's nonstop ring. Going on 25 years here, and it's just more benefits coming out to the veterans and their families due to Agent Orange, Gulf War illnesses. So currently we are asking the 0.3 or 0.23, but next year, yes, we could come ask for the 3, to be honest with you.
Okay. I mean, your workload has picked up and some of the,
Significantly.
so we did discuss that. Their current workload and demands that are coming into their office has grown significantly. Where it ends up a year from now, I guess time will tell. So
The new press release that just went out from VA, this year alone, they have done 1.7 million in claims. And that's just as of today. I believe with that new law that just went in September, it's up by 25% in just a month in claims.
okay.
And that's covering your Agent Orange, Gulf War veterans, which is, your veterans that served during the 90s. There's 20 conditions that they have added. Hypertension, several cancers, and other chronic illnesses.
Okay. Additional questions? Sure.
Can I address-
Yes.
So, just so I'm understanding this correctly, is with the increase and with the increase in workload, I should say, is there a way to look at whether those are residents of the county or are those for all over the state?
So they can be all over the state. We are accredited service officers, so we do have advertising through the VA that puts our phone number out there to contact us, so it can be not only just Peoria County. We do only serve Peoria County for emergency financial assistance, but anything to do with claims, that can be other states as well, yes.
So would the additional money be going toward the emergency assistance or for all activities?
We have just the levy for the emergency assistance. I don't recall what we asked for that. It may have went up, is it 20, or how, Scott, can you refresh my memory how much we asked for that? Is it 25,000?
The 5,000. It went up, emergency relief went up 5,000 from 25 to 30,000.
So
25,000
the
to 30.
emergency release is for rent, utilities, food, and hygiene. That is used only for Peoria County residents. Now, the other services would be for any veterans that contact our offices for services related to compensation, pension, death-related benefits. It can be included to indigent burial.
So we are asking the residents of Peoria County to increase this levy for veterans throughout the state.
The amount that we are asking for is for our employees. I can't answer that correctly.
Okay. I was just trying to make sure I understood.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael's not here. So I did help with the budget preparation. I believe it's for employees and contractual services.
It's for not just, to answer it, I think you're asking, is it just for Peoria County? No. Veterans? No, they're serving veterans outside of Peoria County as well as Peoria County. So that is a topic that I've had discussions with Mr. Brooks on. Kind of the obvious question, why are we asking Peoria County taxpayers to pay for services for other counties who have a VAC and they have veterans who live in the other counties? Why are we funding their services when they could levy their own tax? So that's a challenge at this point. That's a challenge we haven't come to an agreement with. I would say, at this point, they're serving more. Now, I've asked for data. How many of the veterans that we're servicing today live outside of our county, and we didn't get data for that? I think moving forward, that's got to be a report out to this committee moving forward as to who's in county, who's out of county, and where are the services being, or where do the veterans live that we're providing services for. I mean, I'll speak on behalf of Peoria County. We're not opposed to serving the veterans and providing them the service. I guess the challenge is, why aren't the neighboring counties stepping up? And some of them may be small counties that may not have as much resource, like a Stark, but there's other counties that probably should have their own resources to be able to do this.
I can
So,
comment on that.
go ahead.
So the law that just passed, which was in the spring, and I don't have that law exactly, they were not required to have credited service officers. So they are not providing those services that should be provided to veterans.
Who is they?
One would be Tazewell County VAC, and others surround Woodford County and several other counties within the area.
So because their VAC is not credited, they don't qualify for the
They are
act that was
not
passed?
providing the accredited service officers. They're supposed to be starting the training this fall. We have just had discussion with Tazewell County. That is one of the biggest counties that we do receive veterans from. And so we do prioritize Peoria County veterans first. We try to work with Tazewell County, but they're not familiar or accredited to be able to do those services that are needed for the veterans as far as filing the compensation claims.
Well, it's definitely great that you guys have the experience and knowledge that you do, and that's certainly a service to our veterans.
Thank you. We are trying to work with Tazewell County and help them. It's a long process to learn how to do these claims and do them correctly. So we are working with the other counties, and so is the state. They will be going to training through the Illinois Association of County Veteran Service Officers and through the national training. And we have discussed that with Tazewell County, so they are working on it, and we have met with the administrator for assistance with, getting them the training or where they need to go to start that.
Just so that we're clear on what we're voting on, when we go to, this would go to the full board, can we get that report by then so that we can see what the breakout looks like?
So we're asking, can you give me specifically exactly what you're asking for? Is it what Mr. Ricker,
Breakout.
The location of residents that
Yeah.
are, or I'm
I
sorry.
can
location
see
of
if our
veterans.
system does that. We've changed programs, and I will need to see if that's something that I can provide, if our system will give us
Yeah.
that data based upon region.
We're not looking for confidential information. We're just looking for data that would say, 50 were from this county, 20 were from this, and 380 were from Peoria County in this window of time.
Just based on the fact that we're gonna go back to the residents within our districts and say this is how the budget is being broken down, it would be
Sure, I
helpful.
have no problem trying to gather the data. That's one of the issues that we're having is getting a system that will give us the output of that type of data.
Thank you,
But I will work with our program to see what
Okay.
we can do. Yes, definitely.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Other questions from the committee on this topic? Mr. Fennell?
Has there been discussion about possibly causing a fee for transactions from people of other counties to that county?
That ask was made. I did make that ask to the VAC, and at this point, the answer was there's no intention at this point to charge a fee to the other counties. So part of it goes back to Jennifer's question about we need to know how many people from each county we're serving to have that discussion with the other counties. So without that data, it's kind of a hard conversation.
I understand, but if they provided it us and they don't want to do it, do we as a county have the ability to do that to the other county?
And maybe at a county level, we might. That's a good question. Mr. Sorrell, you have any input on, would we have the ability to assess a fee to neighboring counties?
Off the top of my head, great question. I don't have the answer to. We'd have to look at the statute and see what it allows for and doesn't allow for.
Okay. Other questions? Sharon over here?
So you say other counties are not accredited, and you said that's going to start in September. Is that correct, to get those accredited? I guess my question is, how long does that take? And once they're accredited, does that mean your workload is going to go down?
We have discussed with them in September. Now they'll start training, I believe, in November. That is the next online. There was one in August that they did not take. The accreditation is just a week, and then you continue to learn on the job. As far as our workload, I cannot see that going down due to the laws that have passed as far as PACT Act and the Agent Orange presumptive list that are increasing.
Okay. Sharon? Another?
I guess it'd be really important to know how many the veterans we're serving in other counties, because if there's a significant number of them and they're then accredited, I see your workload going down.
Okay.
I understand, and we will do our best to get those numbers to you.
All right. Any other questions from the committee or any of the board members here present? Okay. At this point, okay.
Are you guys talking? Because if you are, I can't hear you.
No, sorry. We had a sidebar, Mr. Rand.
Mr. Chairman and the
state's oh, okay. attorney
talking.
Sorry. I guess, Trish, you made a comment that maybe for clarification for the committee was the accredited part of other county VACs and the act not applying to them until they're credited. Help me clear that up, make sure the committee understands. The perception I received from that statement is only the VACs that are accredited qualify for this act to increase their levies and do what they're doing. Is that true, or is that a...
So as far as that, we have multiple laws we're speaking of. So the law that you're referencing is that they are required to have an accredited service officer as of January 1.
Okay.
For those counties.
I think maybe the important piece of this is just for the committee, and I'll make a statement if someone corrects me, that's great, but my perception is that other county VACs and those counties have the ability to levy a tax to provide the service for their residents and their veterans.
Correct.
There's nothing that restricts a county from doing that today.
Correct.
Okay. So there's not, back to the original assumption is if every county levies appropriately and provides the credited services for their veterans, the veterans have a place to go. They shouldn't have to be transported or drive to Peoria County to get service. They can get service locally.
Correct.
Okay. But until then, the Peoria County taxpayers are supplementing some of that. So I guess one of the asks I would have moving forward, and I'll commit to working with the VAC, is how do we help these other counties become accredited and providing service for their local veterans so we take that burden off of our taxpayers. Because it's not fair for our taxpayers to be covering theirs just because they haven't reached accreditation or levied appropriately. I don't want to burden this a whole lot longer. I'll ask one more round for comments or questions from. So at this point, this will be the topic where this extra $305,000 is the 0.8 that's on the tax levy, and by levy, the VAC is a line item in the county's tax levy today. One of the many that get to our what was 0.824. Now it's going to be the new 8. What's the new number, Scott? I have it in my head by now. You've read it to me like 10 times.
No, it's fine, Mr. It is
8.32 or 83.2.
83.21, correct.
Yeah. So the kind of the point here is we have a decision as a board, as this committee and the entire board is, do we raise the tax levy that the county is responsible for, includes all these line items, and the VAC is part of it? Do we want to exercise our right to increase taxes to our taxpayers this year with all of the things going on with inflation, costs going up, things that are burdening our current local residents? Do we want to add another burden? And if we do, then we publicly go out and state we'll raise the tax levy. If we don't, then we're going to have to find some other funds to offset this $305,000 that the VAC is asking for. At this point, I guess I'm going to kind of get some sense from the committee members. Would you prefer to raise the levy or find $305,000 somewhere else in our funds and ask another department to help share this cost? Anybody have any thoughts or direction? Oh, sorry, Sharon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not in favor of raising property taxes. I think that we could potentially find the money in our general fund.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for Mr. Fennell. Any thoughts? You're the finance person.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. I concur.
Okay. Jennifer?
I would echo both of their statements, but I also want to be cautious of what we're cutting for the taxpayers for potentially providing service outside of the county.
Okay, good point to put on record. Junior, thought? You get money from another, not raise taxes? No tax. Phil? Phil, have you got your mic on? Thank you.
I'd like to see the report first about these other counties, that we're taking care of their people. I think when our taxpayers find out that we're taking care of these other people, I think either we've got to shut down those people from coming in here and burden us with their responsibility, because they're responsible for that.
Okay. I don't know if we...
Now, whether or not I want to raise taxes, I'd rather see that report where maybe we can assess those other counties a fee and get extra money there and not have to raise taxes.
Okay. I mean, between now and, our official meeting on the 13th, we're not going to have time to do that for this year, but I understand that. I would suggest as we move forward, we're not going to continue burdening our other budgets for this. We have to find a solution. So this right now is a short-term solution, potentially taking funds from other reserves to cover this one up.
Steve, this is Andrew. Do I have a moment to weigh in here?
Say that again, Mr. Rand?
It's Andrew. Do I have a moment to weigh in here?
Yes, you do.
I appreciate the perspective that the VAC is coming from, but I think it's a little bit tone deaf. We are existing in a hypersensitive state where our citizens are tired of being taxed to death. They're tired of not having representatives listen to what they say is important. And I think they're particularly averse to committees that are ungoverned by taxpayers who help set fees and levies and charges that they have to pay year in and year out. Nobody disputes the purpose here, but it sure would be a whole lot different had we got some answers to the very fair questions that you raised in your email to Mr. Brooks. But at this point, I think we'd be hard-pressed to find a board member who's going to vote to increase taxes regardless of how important the project is. We've got to find them another way. So keeping the levy at the current amount, all funds included, when I say the current amount, the pre-adjusted amount that Scott's done here is the only thing I'll support, and we'll just find a way to take it out of general fund this time before we come up with a better action plan as to how to deal with it next year. And I would start next year, like the end of this month, on how we choose to deal with this.
Okay. No, thank you for your comments and advice. I appreciate that. Any other comments, Mr. Chairman?
I'm good.
Okay, no, thank you. I just finished here at the room. Mr. Wendish, any input as a member of the committee as to raise taxes or find money from another fund for 2023? The finding money from another fund. Put your mic on as you would.
This is definitely not the time to raise it, but I guess I was unaware on how much, or the question, I guess. I was completely unaware of that before today, that it was that significant. So, but I definitely say no increase.
Okay. Dr. Blair?
I do apologize for being late.
That's okay.
It was class. I had to go to class.
I know we moved it early on you, so that was our move.
That's okay. I mean, I'm agreeing with the sentiment in the room. Are we mandated to support out-of-county veterans if there's no one accredited in their area?
I don't know if we're mandated. I think that's a choice that our VAC has made. I don't think it's a mandate, is it, Trish?
It's a discretion of
Discretion
the
VAC.
commission.
I think our VAC has done such an incredible job and are so effective that we're being punished for it by bringing in other people from other counties, and I don't think that's fair to our taxpayers. So I certainly want to see some kind of solution that helps people get supported by the counties, and I definitely want to get more information of how many people we're talking about in terms of who we're helping outside of the county.
Okay. No, thank you. All right. Well, not to belabor it anymore, so tomorrow at the, oh, sorry, Mr. Fennell.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware, because these expenses are ongoing. We've got a $305,000 this year. That's going to be there next year again, and you've already taken from the general fund, so you're going to be right back in that same hole. It's just an area, but just make everybody aware. Thank you.
Well, and just to build on that, I think Trish commented that there's a potential that they're going to raise it from the current levy up to maximum 3 pennies next year. So, we're talking another 8, so another 305,000. So a year from now, we're looking at over 610,000 ballparkish that would come in against us. So again, that's something we cannot sustain out of the general fund. But okay, so on that, oh, sorry, Sharon.
Thank you. I had a discussion with our treasurer about pulling the tax levy for the VAC out of the total amount for the Peoria County. She was going to look into that. Have you had a chance to do that? And is it possible that we could do that it would actually be separate from Peoria County so our taxpayers know what their tax levy is compared to what our tax levy is?
Good question. I don't know, Scott, would you want to speak to it or have Nicole speak to that ask?
I can start, and then I think it'd be appropriate for the treasurer or the clerk or the state's attorney's office to supplement or correct anything that I say. So we, Ms. Williams and I had a similar thought, independent of each other, and I had a similar exchange with the treasurer last week about that very topic. Prior to the treasurer actually being able to read the act, The initial inclination was that no, it would not be able to be separated out, and that's because the tax bills, the rows on the tax bill are for governmental entities, and the Veterans Assistance Commission is not a separate governmental entity. It is a function of Peoria County government. That being said, the state's attorney and I were just conversing between committee meetings today, and it's a little bit foggier than that because the language that is in the act may allow for it, except for the fact that it doesn't recognize Veterans Assistance Commissions in any county in the state as separate governmental entities. So it is, I think, from my perspective, undecided at this time, and I'd welcome any clarification from the treasurer or the county clerk who plays a role in the tax cycle process, or the state's attorney's office.
I assume you guys would like me to weigh in? Okay. So I would agree with Scott's ultimate statement that it is not entirely clear right now. The statute, this new statute, the language clearly highlights the separateness of this tax levy. The county is not to include this levy in its own calculations, its own caps. It refers to this levy being separate from the county in several parts of this piece of legislation. So I've been talking to the treasurer and the county clerk on this issue. This piece of legislation, honestly, I mean, it's like gone off the deep end. This piece of legislation, it's very, it causes many problems. It's not clear in many ways, especially the logistics, the day-to-day logistics of how we would go about having a separate levy, but it's not a separate taxing district. That's just one example of the convolutedness of this all. So I would agree with Scott's ultimate statement that there's not a clear answer at this time. We're going to continue to look into whether or not it could be separate on the tax bill. This has kind of just bubbled up in the last few days, so we will keep looking at that. But just wanted to kind of give that background that this is strange and the setup of it rather unfortunate from my perspective.
Yeah, because I think the VAC has a board of directors, but to my knowledge, they're not elected by the public to be representing the public for taxing. So again, that to me creates a real conflict as to how an independent commission that's not represented by elected officials can set a tax levy. But again, I don't want to go through this whole bill at this point because there's a lot of detail in it. I would just ask, hopefully, as we have discussions and other counties have discussions, maybe we could look at this bill and ask the state legislation to take a reconsideration. Jennifer, questions or comments?
Just a quick comment for clarification. I have heard from many folks that this was a very poorly written bill leading to lots of confusion and questions, and that there is a trailer bill planning to be worked on in veto. I have no idea what that looks like. I just know that that's something they're working on to clear up, I think, from the many state's attorneys they've heard from with questions.
Okay. Well, at this point, tomorrow during the executive session, when we do the tax levy, we'll put a request in to adjust our budget to reduce our general fund levy from 20 point some cents down to basically taking the 0.8 out of it. So we'll have to make a line item adjustment there to allow the VAC to stay where it's at. So we'll end up at the 82.4 cent levy. So again, give us some thought, but that's the proposal that we'll put on the floor tomorrow at the executive meeting.
Brian Elsesser.
Joined.
Right. Brian, we're still in the previous meeting, but you can stay on and listen. All right, so we'll move on, I guess. Scott, do we need to make amendment here to adjust the funds? Because I don't have the general fund in
Right.
this one, right?
So, great question, Mr. Chairman. What's before you is, and as part of this conversation, is the levy request for the VAC. One thing that is clear in the act is with the VAC having adopted their own resolution asking for this levy, you have to give them this levy. And then, as many of you've discussed, it's a function of how do we balance the rest of the levies. That pie chart that we show is how do we balance the rest of those levies to maintain the overall rate, which is your ultimate policy goal. So, as you correctly articulated, there's really no motion or amendment to be made here. The amendment really is appropriate when we get to the general county budget tomorrow at the Joint Finance Executive Committee meeting, and assuming the consensus is that you want to lower the general fund levy by the 0.8 of a penny, that's what the motion and the second should be to do tomorrow. And then there will need to be a follow-up discussion about how you're going to cover that loss of revenue in the general fund, because then the general fund will be out of balance. What many of you and other board members not on this committee have talked to me about over the last week and a half is for FY23, we would use reserves of the general fund to cover that $305,000 and change in lost revenue to the general fund. But ultimately, that's a decision that can be hashed out by the committee tomorrow, and then ultimately the county board next Thursday.
Okay. Does that clarify it? So here, we'll ask to go ahead and approve, because again, as Mr. Sorrell clearly stated, we don't have the authority to change or adjust the VAC. So the ask on the floor is to approve all of the budget pieces that we've just spoken of. And then we can make that decision tomorrow of adjusting the general fund levy to accommodate this increase. Is that all clear? So the motion on the floor is to approve the Ways and Means budget the way it's presented today. All in favor with the sign of aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed with a nay? Okay, that passes. For efficiency, we will go through the informational items a little quicker than normal. I'll just, in your packet, the county clerk's information is in there. The county clerk is well in place as far as revenues. She's at about 72% on the year versus should be at 66. So she's got revenues coming in a little ahead of the plan. Supervisor of assessments, Dave, did you have anything specific you'd like to share with us? And the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, very quickly. Our complaint deadline has ended for the board review. We had about 355 total, which is the lowest on record that we've had. And a majority of those were commercial properties. We had very few residential filings this year. I think maybe about 120. And of those 355, we had 242 of those came from one person. So we really had a low amount. I'm not anticipating that next year. So it'll be a higher amount. And any increase in revenues that you saw is, as a reminder, we have taken over Radnor Township. So we are now solely responsible for Radnor Township assessing duties. That's it.
Well, thanks for that highlight in the Radnor Township. I missed calling that out in the budget, so appreciate that. Next one is the treasurer. Just some general comments from our treasurer.
We just finished a distribution. Our next distribution is October 19th. The delinquent notices will be sent out next week, and our tax sale is November 7th.
Great, thank you. All right. VAC, Trish, do you have any report that you'd like to share? Okay. We will, pass on the VAC's report at this point. We do have one resolution, the monthly delinquent taxes, and so I need a motion to put that on the floor. All right, Dr. Blair is the first, and Junior is the second. So there is 2 pages of tax sale properties. There is one change that I want to point out, and we need to consider making a change. On page 1 of 3, if you're in the resolution for tax About 10 down, the account name Gregory Hightower had put in and had won the tax sale to acquire a property here in the county.
Hadn't got to her yet today?
Sorry about that. So Mr. Hightower had put in the winning bid to purchase a property. Since that has occurred, Mr. Hightower has deceased, and we've talked, the treasurer and I have discussed this as to what do you do with it, because it was really, he had a couple other people on his list that were financial people with him, but we don't have addresses, contacts, names. So the proposal is that we make an amendment to remove that sale at this point and allow the treasurer to return the payment that was made by Mr. Hightower back to his family, and then propose to offer it to the second highest bidder. But the motion, I think, today is just to remove it from the tax sale because of the situation of Mr. Hightower's deceased before we completed the transaction. So I need a motion on the floor to amend this to remove that one line item. Jennifer is a first. Mr. Fennel is a second. So can we capture that, Jan, well enough to remove the item 922-010 from the resolution? With that, no other amendments to it unless someone else has one. Okay, we'd like to go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of passing with the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. We have to approve the amendment. And a little bit slow here, but I'm working it. We have to approve the amendment. So the first motion is to approve the amendment to remove that line item. All in favor with the sign of aye? Aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay? Okay, that passes. Now let's approve the resolution list with that amendment made. All in favor with the sign of aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed with the sign of nay? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Miscellaneous. Anything for miscellaneous? Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, and we're adjourned.